A human female designation, Callie O'Reilly, stood on the edge of a docking platform aboard Outpost 47. A malfunctioning cargo freighter was spiraling toward the station's energy core, its thrusters misfiring in a pattern that even the most advanced AI struggled to predict. Every protocol dictated an immediate evacuation. Instead, the human woman had shoved a drink into a confused alien's hands and uttered the now infamous words, "Hold my beer." The room sat in stunned silence as they watched the footage play out again. One of the high-ranking officials, a gelatinous being with a voice like bubbling tar, broke the silence. "We have reviewed this no fewer than 47 times, and still I fail to comprehend. What does she mean?" A wiry bureaucrat with an elongated neck and twitching antennae cleared his throat. "Our linguists have determined that 'hold my beer' is a human phrase spoken before an act of reckless violence or absurd heroism, often both." The room grew even quieter, if such a thing were possible. The Emperor's fingers tapped lightly on the polished armrest of his throne, his claws leaving tiny, imperceptible marks. "And what happened next?" he asked, though the answer was already well documented. On the screen, Callie's every movement was impossibly fast, yet somehow casual. Without hesitation, she grabbed a cable from the nearest docking clamp, wrapped it around her arm, and launched herself toward the freighter using a maneuver that should have been mathematically impossible. The station's engineers, trained in the precise sciences of gravitic control and inertial dampening, had frozen in sheer disbelief. She had no thruster pack, no calculations, no predictive AI. She just moved. She crashed onto the side of the freighter, boots locking onto the hull with magnetic grips, her fingers working with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The thrusters fired erratically, sending the ship into a deadly spin that should have flung her off into the void. Instead, she dug in her heels, twisted a panel open with nothing but brute force, and yanked at something inside. And then the freighter stabilized. Not because of some last-second intervention by the station's sophisticated AI. Not because of any miracle from the highly trained engineers still scrambling to react. Because Callie O'Reilly had, in less than 60 seconds, manually rerouted power through what the alien technicians later identified as a completely improvised and physically implausible method. The footage ended. The silence stretched. Finally, the Emperor exhaled slowly. "You are telling me that a human woman, unaided, unarmed, and unarmored, prevented a catastrophic station meltdown with nothing but her hands and an apparent disregard for physics?" The bureaucrat nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Excellency." The Emperor closed his eyes, an old instinct from a time when he had been a warrior instead of a ruler. This was bad. No, this was worse than bad. This was extinction-level bad. He had seen human soldiers fight in past conflicts. They were already impossible to manage. But this was worse than war. This was improvisation. Another member of the council, a frail, bird-like diplomat, hesitated before speaking. "And what happened to the human after this event?" A deep sigh rippled through the chamber. The bureaucrat shuffled his documents, though everyone knew he didn't need to. She landed safely, retrieved her drink, took a sip. Then she reportedly shrugged and said, and I quote, "Wasn't my best work." The room erupted in a frenzy of horrified chattering. The Emperor massaged his temples. "Wasn't her best work?" he repeated, voice dangerously quiet. She claimed she once did a similar thing back home with a broken-down shuttle, 2 rolls of duct tape, and a bet riding on it. A dry, wheezing noise came from one of the older council members. The bureaucrat continued in a strangled voice, "Our intelligence officers have gone through recorded human history. This is not an isolated incident. Humans, specifically human women, have demonstrated repeated disregard for physics, self-preservation, and any known laws of probability when preceded by this phrase." Another official, who had been reading through historical reports, paled beneath his bioluminescent skin. "There are hundreds of cases. A human woman once outdrank an entire delegation of poison-resistant warriors just to win a bet. Another carried an injured alien the size of a small hovercraft across a battlefield because, and I quote, "it looked sad." And this one is truly disturbing. A human scientist once built a working hyperdrive out of junk scraps because someone told her she couldn't. The murmurs reached a fever pitch. The Emperor stood abruptly, his golden robes billowing with the force of the movement. The room fell silent once again. "This changes everything." His voice was grim. "Effective immediately. Human women are to be classified as a Class X galactic threat." A few gasps. Some frantic note-taking. A trembling ambassador from the Luthri Dominion raised a hand. "Your Excellency, if I may, are we certain? Perhaps this is simply an anomaly." The Emperor turned to him with something bordering on pity. "Anomaly? No, Ambassador. The anomaly is that we survived this long without realizing." A high-pitched beep interrupted the discussion. A nervous functionary, barely out of his fledgling years, approached, clutching a datapad as though it might explode. "Sir, we have an urgent update." The Emperor gestured for him to proceed. The human woman in question, Callie O'Reilly, has just been sighted again. She is currently at a spaceport, engaging in what appears to be an illegal speeder race against 3 heavily armed bounty hunters. It seems she wagered her ship, and the functionary swallowed audibly, according to intercepted audio. She has just said, "Hold my beer." For one endless second, no one breathed. Then chaos. Council members sprinted for exits. Generals barked orders. Bureaucrats clutched at their paperwork in vain attempts to process what this meant for interstellar security. And the Emperor, the most powerful being in the known galaxy, did the only thing that made sense. Evacuate the sector. Immediately. His voice was deathly calm. If a human woman has spoken these words again, we are already too late. In that moment, the fate of the galaxy was sealed, not by war, not by diplomacy, but by one human woman, a reckless challenge, and the phrase that would haunt the galactic empire for generations to come. The Imperial Palace, a fortress of blackened steel and shimmering force fields, loomed over the capital city like a brooding specter. Within its core, deep in the war room, the highest-ranking officials of the galactic empire sat in silent horror, each one staring at the massive holoscreen before them. A human woman had spoken the words again. "Hold my beer." The implications of that phrase alone had sent the Imperial High Command into unprecedented chaos. The Emperor himself, a being whose presence alone could silence entire planetary governments, sat motionless, his golden eyes reflecting the flickering display of Callie O'Reilly's latest act of reckless defiance against all known laws of probability. Around the room, the other gathered officials, a collection of hardened generals, war tacticians, and intelligence operatives, traded glances that ranged from barely contained panic to open resignation. At the head of the room, Grand Strategist Vizier, a reptilian warrior who had commanded 100 planetary sieges, cleared his throat. "Your Excellency," he began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is now the second recorded incident in which the human female Callie O'Reilly has defied rational logic. The first involved her manually stabilizing a freighter with no equipment. The second," he hesitated, as if reluctant to even say the words. "She has won an illegal speeder race against 3 of the most dangerous bounty hunters in the quadrant." The Emperor steepled his long, clawed fingers, his expression unreadable. "You are telling me that she unaided, unaugmented, outmaneuvered 3 cybernetically enhanced combat pilots in a race designed for death?" Vizier nodded, his throat scales rippling with unease. "It is worse than that, Your Excellency. The footage shows that she was laughing the entire time." Someone in the room made a strangled noise. Another official, a thin, willowy creature with 6 spindly arms, shuffled his data tablet and hesitated before speaking. Further analysis suggests that, at one point, she deliberately disengaged her stabilizers and drifted through an asteroid field while consuming a beverage. The Emperor blinked. The room remained eerily quiet. A metallic figure, its polished frame reflecting the dim lighting, shifted slightly at the far end of the war table. The Empire's most advanced AI tactician, designated as the omniscient analytical machine for total overwatch and neutralization, or OAMTON, spoke in a voice devoid of inflection. We must consider the possibility that human women have developed an unknown evolutionary trait that allows them to manipulate probability itself, the AI stated. Current data indicates a 97.6% likelihood that whenever a human female says, "Hold my beer," an event of catastrophic significance will occur. A shudder ran through the gathered officials. The Emperor exhaled slowly. And yet, the humans remain oblivious. They do not invade. They do not threaten. They do not seem to grasp the power they wield. Vizier hesitated. That is precisely what makes them so dangerous, Your Excellency. The Emperor stood, his silhouette casting long, jagged shadows across the chamber. Prepare an immediate withdrawal from all human-occupied territories. If they have remained neutral thus far, we must ensure it remains so. The room erupted into protests. One of the senior admirals, a hulking brute with bioluminescent scars across his face, slammed a fist against the table. Withdraw? Sire, we control hundreds of sectors. The humans occupy barely a handful of insignificant planets. If we retreat, we send a message of weakness. The Emperor's eyes flashed dangerously. And if we stay, we invite annihilation. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of centuries of conquest. You have read the reports. You have seen the evidence. You know what happens when humans are underestimated. A tense silence followed. OAMTON broke it. Records indicate that previous attempts to engage human forces resulted in unexpected casualties for the Empire. Despite their lack of formal structure, their sheer unpredictability and irrational problem-solving ability have rendered conventional warfare ineffective. A full-scale invasion was attempted 3 centuries ago. We do not speak of the spaghetti incident, a general growled. The AI continued undeterred, as well as multiple smaller engagements, including the infamous bar-tab conflict of 3497 and the grilled cheese ceasefire of 4012. Each instance has resulted in strategic failure on our part. A flickering image appeared on the holoscreen. A human woman, Callie O'Reilly, standing with arms crossed grinning, as 3 bounty hunters were carried away on hover stretchers. The phrase, "Drinks on me, losers," was visible on a nearby neon sign. The Emperor stared at it for a long moment. Then, with a resigned sigh, he turned back to his advisors. Effective immediately, human women are to be classified as an existential anomaly threat. The murmurs started again. Vizier frowned. Your Excellency, an anomaly? Are you certain? That is a designation we have only ever applied to cosmic events beyond our control. The Emperor nodded solemnly, because that is what they are. A force beyond logic, beyond prediction. If they were actively hostile, we would have perished long ago. That they are not is the only reason we still stand. An alarm chimed. A comms officer rushed into the chamber, panting. Your Excellency, urgent transmission from the Hegaran border fleet. Human civilian ships have been spotted entering Imperial space. The entire room tensed. A military incursion? Had the humans finally decided to take action? The officer swallowed. They appear to be a convoy. And, they are broadcasting a message. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. Play it. The speakers crackled. A voice unmistakably human blared into the chamber with casual indifference. Yo, what's up, Imperial dudes? We heard there was a mass evacuation and figured there might be some sweet, abandoned beachfront property. You guys moving out? Can we have your stuff? A deep, pained silence filled the room. Vazir's tail lashed once. They think we are simply leaving. OAMTON chimed in. Historical analysis suggests that humans interpret territorial shifts as a form of Dibs declaration. There is a 94.3% chance that they will move into any sector we abandon, assuming it is an invitation rather than an act of retreat. The Emperor stared at the holoscreen, watching as the convoy, filled with human merchants, engineers, and what appeared to be an entire floating sports bar, continued to approach Imperial territory, completely unaware of the sheer diplomatic nightmare they were causing. His claws dug into the table. We cannot win. A murmur of uneasy agreement rippled through the chamber. The comms officer hesitated. "Sire, should we respond?" The Emperor exhaled, rubbing his temples as the weight of an impossible reality settled onto his shoulders. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached for the console. After a long pause, he pressed the button. "Take whatever planets you want," he said, voice hollow. "Just don't say the phrase." There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice crackled back, cheerful and nonchalant. "Oh yeah? Sweet. We'll be real chill, don't worry. Hey, by the way, Callie O'Reilly's heading to your capital next. She said something about wanting to check out the nightlife. You guys got any good bars?" The Emperor's blood ran cold. The war room erupted into sheer, undiluted chaos. The evacuation of the Galactic Empire's capital began 6 minutes later. The neon glow of the spaceport flickered against the black backdrop of the void, casting an artificial warmth over the bustling crowds of traders, mercenaries, and wanderers who called the fringes of the galaxy home. Among them, utterly unaware of the diplomatic crisis unfolding in her wake, Callie O'Reilly leaned lazily against the hull of her ship, a half-drunk bottle of something vaguely alcoholic swinging from her fingertips. Her ship, the Rust Bucket, was a patchwork nightmare of old Terran engineering and stolen alien tech, held together by sheer willpower, duct tape, and whatever spare parts she could swindle off unsuspecting traders. It wasn't much, but it was hers. More importantly, it was fast, and it had a bar stocked with enough liquor to make even the most hardened spacefaring veteran rethink their life choices. "All right," she said, tipping her head toward the small gathering of misfits that made up her crew. "Somebody want to explain why my face is plastered all over half the bounty boards in the system? I mean, I get it, I'm delightful, but this seems excessive." A snort came from the side. Rigo, her pilot and self-proclaimed galactic conspiracy theorist, flicked a glowing holographic display toward her. His long, pointed ears twitched with amusement as he scanned the wanted notice. "Let's see, wanted for reckless endangerment of an Imperial fleet, violation of interstellar physics, and, oh, this one's fun, causing a mass evacuation through the misuse of alcohol-related vernacular." Callie frowned. "That last one sounds made up." A deep, static-laced chuckle resonated from the ship's onboard AI sprocket, an old war-class machine intelligence that had somehow ended up reprogrammed as a bartender. "Technically, it's not. You've been labeled as a Class X galactic threat due to your repeated use of the phrase, 'hold my beer.' The Empire believes you possess an anomalous ability to alter probability in ways that defy rational explanation." Callie blinked. "I what?" Rigo grinned. "Congratulations, Captain. You've officially scared the most powerful government in the galaxy into full retreat. That's got to be a record." Callie ran a hand through her dark, wind-swept hair, exhaling through her nose. "All I did was win a stupid speeder race and manually stabilize a failing freighter using nothing but a tow cable and brute force," Sprocket added helpfully. "Yeah, well, I've done dumber things for less," she muttered. Rigo crossed his arms, his sharp, feline-like eyes gleaming with amusement. "So what's the plan, boss?" "We lay low. Find a nice little asteroid to hide on until the heat dies down." Callie considered it. A reasonable person, hell, even a half-reasonable one, would probably take the opportunity to disappear. Let things cool off. Avoid the Empire's gaze until some other disaster came along to distract them. But Callie O'Reilly had never been accused of being reasonable. Instead, she grinned. "Nah," she said, pushing off the hull and taking a long swig from her bottle. "I think I'm going to go have a chat with the Emperor." Silence. Rigo's tail flicked once. "I'm sorry. I must have had too much caffeine today, because it almost sounded like you just said you wanted to go talk to the most powerful man in the galaxy, the one currently losing his mind over the fact that you exist." "Yep." Sprocket let out a low, synthetic whistle. "Well, this should be interesting." Callie stretched, rolling out her shoulders. "Look, this whole thing has clearly gotten out of hand. I just need to sit him down, crack open a couple of beers, and tell him to chill the hell out." Rigo pinched the bridge of his nose. "Callie, you are literally the reason they're panicking. You realize that, right? All the more reason to sort this out in person. You won an illegal speeder race against 3 of their deadliest bounty hunters while drinking. Technically, it was while finishing a drink, she corrected. They think you're some kind of interdimensional chaos entity. Callie shrugged. Not my fault they're dramatic. Rigo groaned. And what, exactly, do you think is going to happen when you walk into the Imperial Palace? They'll just let you in. Of course not, she said. That's why I'm bringing a gift. Rigo's eyes narrowed. What kind of gift? Callie grinned. The kind that makes powerful men rethink their life choices. She tapped the side of her ship. The cargo hold hissed open, revealing 2 entire barrels of handcrafted, earth-brewed whiskey. The kind of liquor that could make even the most battle-hardened warlords weep. Rigo stared. Then he looked at her. Then back at the barrels. Then back at her. You're going to bribe the Emperor of the Galactic Empire with booze. Good booze, she corrected. The best booze. Sprocket whirred thoughtfully. Based on historical data, this may actually be a more effective diplomatic strategy than any prior attempt at intergalactic negotiations. Rigo made a strangled noise. That should not be true. Should not be, and as are 2 different things, Callie said cheerfully, slapping a hand against the side of the barrels. Now, are you in, or am I drinking with the Emperor by myself? Rigo looked up at the stars, as though searching for a god that might give him patience. Then he sighed. Fine. But when this inevitably goes sideways, I just want it on record that I tried to stop you. Sprocket Servo's word. Duly noted. Callie grinned. Perfect. Now let's go make history. The journey to the Imperial capital was faster than anticipated, mostly because the Empire had abandoned half its checkpoints in sheer panic. Callie's ship sailed through security nets unchallenged, weaving past patrols that were supposed to stop incoming traffic, but were apparently too busy running in the opposite direction. It was, in her professional opinion, hilarious. By the time they reached orbit, the Rust Bucket's comm system crackled to life. A voice, tense and uncertain, filtered through the speakers. Unidentified Terran vessel. This is the Imperial Defense Grid. State your purpose. Callie leaned forward, flipping on the transmission. Hey, what's up, Imperial dudes? I got some premium Earth whiskey and a business proposition for your boss. Silence. A second voice, hushed, whispered in the background. Oh stars, it's her. The first voice stammered. Stand by. Callie leaned back, kicking her boots up onto the console. Told you. They love me. Rigo covered his face with both hands. Minutes passed. Then, finally, the comm crackled again. The Emperor has agreed to meet with you. Sprocket emitted a low whistle. That was remarkably easy. They're terrified of her, Rigo muttered. Of course it was easy. Callie smirked. All right, boys. Let's go make some history. When they landed, the palace was, predictably, on high alert. Imperial guards lined the halls, weapons in hand, but their faces betrayed something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite awe. As Callie strode toward the throne room, a few of them exchanged wary glances. Is that her? She's smaller than I expected. Don't make eye contact. They say she can smell fear. The doors to the throne room loomed ahead. Callie adjusted the barrels of whiskey on her shoulders, cracked her neck, and pushed forward. The Emperor was waiting. His expression, carefully composed, flickered with something unreadable as she stepped into the room. Behind her, the doors slammed shut. Silence stretched. Then Callie grinned. So, you want to talk this out over drinks? The Imperial throne room, a place of solemn grandeur where galactic rulers had forged treaties and declared wars, had never seen a meeting quite like this. Callie O'Reilly stood before the Emperor of the Galactic Empire, a smirk on her lips, 2 barrels of Earth whiskey resting beside her feet. The guards stood frozen in place, their weapons ready, but their expressions torn between confusion and terror. The air was thick with tension. The Emperor, draped in golden robes that shimmered like molten sunlight, studied her with an expression carefully devoid of emotion. His clawed fingers tapped against the armrest of his throne in rhythmic precision, a habit that suggested either deep contemplation or barely concealed panic. Callie couldn't quite tell which. You, he said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds, are the most dangerous entity in the known universe. Callie rolled her shoulders, cracking her neck. Yeah, I get that a lot. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. I did not mean it as a compliment. She huffed, shifting her stance as she hooked her thumbs into her belt loops. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. The Emperor's expression did not change. That is precisely what makes you dangerous. Callie exhaled, bending down to pat the nearest whiskey barrel. All right, fine. You want to see what kind of threat I really am? She grinned. Let's have a drink. The tension in the room solidified like stone. The guards visibly stiffened. One of the advisors, a nervous-looking creature with translucent skin, audibly gasped. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's horror, he inclined his head. Very well. Callie wasn't entirely sure what she expected when she suggested a drinking contest with the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, but she certainly hadn't anticipated being personally escorted to the Emperor's private lounge. It was lavish, obviously. Rich velvet seating, floating chandeliers, a bar stocked with bottles, so rare they probably had planetary governments attached to them. A massive window stretched across one side, offering a breathtaking view of the imperial capital below, glittering like a field of stars. Callie set the barrels down beside the central table and popped the seal on one. The sharp, smoky scent of aged whiskey filled the air, making even the guards twitch. She grabbed 2 glasses, poured a generous measure into each, and slid one across the table toward the Emperor. The Emperor regarded the amber liquid with thinly veiled suspicion. This is the human weapon, then? Callie chuckled. Nah, just good booze. He lifted the glass, turning it in his hand as though inspecting for hidden dangers. Then, slowly, he brought it to his lips and took a sip. The silence that followed was exquisite. The Emperor's eyes widened. His fingers tightened around the glass. A slow, almost imperceptible shudder rolled through his massive frame. His throat moved as he swallowed. This, he murmured, voice uncharacteristically quiet, is excellent. Callie grinned, tossing back her own drink. Told ya. For a long moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then, in a motion so deliberate it sent a ripple of unease through his gathered advisors, he poured himself another. The second drink went down faster. By the third, the guards were visibly panicking. One of the diplomats whispered something into a communicator, probably alerting the emergency fleet that their supreme leader was possibly being assassinated by fermented grain. Callie stretched out in her chair, swirling the whiskey in her glass. See? Not so bad, right? The Emperor exhaled, something that almost resembled amusement flickering across his sharp features. This is the first human encounter that has not ended in utter disaster. Callie grinned. Yeah, we're not always looking to start fights. She set her glass down, leaning forward. Look, I get it. Y'all don't know what to do with us. We don't follow your logic. We don't respect your fear. And we sure as hell don't let impossible odds stop us from doing something really, really stupid. The Emperor's golden gaze met hers. Then tell me, Callie O'Reilly, what do humans want? She leaned back, smirking. Honestly, the same things as everyone else. A good drink, a solid ship, and a decent crew to run with. The Emperor watched her for a long, unreadable moment. Then, to everyone's absolute horror, he chuckled. It was a low, rumbling sound, more like distant thunder than genuine mirth, but it was there. I should execute you, he mused. Callie grinned, tipping her glass toward him. You could try. He shook his head. No, I imagine that would only escalate things further. Another drink. Another pause. The Emperor's gaze flicked toward the vast cityscape beyond the window. My empire fled from you, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The most powerful force in the galaxy, reduced to paranoia because of a phrase. Callie shrugged. Not my fault y'all scare easy. He huffed. Perhaps not. Another sip. Another long silence. And then, without warning, he drained his glass and stood. His advisors visibly flinched. I have made my decision, he declared, his voice returning to its imperial weight. Effective immediately, the Empire shall cease all hostile classifications of humanity. One of the diplomats choked. Your Excellency, you cannot. He lifted a hand, silencing them. His gaze locked onto Callie's. In return, you will ensure that no human woman speaks those words in imperial space again." Callie smirked. "I can't promise that." The Emperor sighed, rubbing his temples. "I expected as much." He exhaled, then turned toward his waiting entourage. "Prepare the official declaration. The Empire shall recognize Earth and its colonies as strategic unpredictability zones. All forces are to maintain a respectful distance." A stunned silence followed. Then, slowly, Callie pushed back her chair, stretching with satisfaction. "Well," she said, "glad we could work things out." The Emperor's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You are infuriating." Callie smirked. "I get that a lot." She turned toward the exit, hands in her pockets, her mission complete. But just before she reached the threshold, the Emperor's voice rang out once more. "One last thing, Callie O'Reilly." She glanced over her shoulder. "Yeah." The Emperor lifted his glass one final time. "Never tell me to hold your beer." Callie laughed, loud and unrestrained. "Deal." And with that, the most absurd diplomatic resolution in the history of the galaxy was sealed, not with war, not with treaties, but with whiskey.